welcome to Confetti All Around. I am so excited for my next guest. You're going to find out all about her, but she is also family, and we'll get into that story. But my next guest is Christy. She is a senior at the University of Mexico, and she's studying Chicanx Studies, and she is a Mellon Mays undergraduate research fellow, and her research focuses on Chicanas in the Evangelical Church. This is a little bit of what we're going to get into as well, so I'm really happy she's here with us. She currently lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico with her partner and their 3 kids. So I am so excited to welcome you, Christy.
Thank you. Yay. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes,
really
yes. Thank you for being my first guest. But really, I wanted to talk a little bit about, we're talking about you being a Chicana, and I want to get into that. But I want to just tell you a couple months ago, you were on my couch with your partner and our kids, or we were talking about our kids, and hearing your story, I felt like I knew you. I felt like I knew you for a long time. And the backstory with me and Christy is we're actually family by marriage, and I am married to your cousin. First cousins, right? Your sister,
Yeah.
your mom and my husband's mom were sisters.
Yeah,
Okay.
They were besties.
Yeah. And so I know that when I met my partner, he's always was telling me about the church. So I've heard the church stories from his side. And I honestly thought, will my husband's family be okay with me because they're really religious and I didn't grow up religious. And so I didn't know. And seeing you on the couch and how you share in vulnerability is something that is just so beautiful about your spirit. So thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, this is, I live for this. This is great. I love talking because I'm thinking all the time. And so being able to talk, especially about our unique experience in the church, I really enjoy it, which is probably very strange to say for some people, but I do really
I love listening to it. Like when we go to Northwoods Inn and your family's together, like your generation of cousins, when Rochelle's there and Kevin and all of them, I'm like, wait, what? Because, and no disrespect, it's just that when you grow up in something and it's your norm, I think you think that's the norm that everybody does. So for someone like me that didn't grow up in church, I'm like, wait, so why couldn't you wear pants? And they're like, well, you can't. So we're going to get into some of that, but I love hearing your family stories. And also there's so many people in your family that I know that really have spoken into their truth and live in their authentic lives. So you have a really cool family. You guys are really doing things for your lineage. So I want to ask you first, before we get into that, what does it mean to you to be a Chicana? I get asked that all the time. I want to hear what you say.
Yeah. Gosh. I mean, I think for me, it's, I didn't grow up, I wasn't handed down this history of knowing what my people did in, the 70s with the Chicano movement and things like that. And so my definition is really, I feel like for everybody, it's different what it means to be Chicana. So for me, a Chicana is, my definition is that I live in this in-between space everywhere I go. I'm not, growing up, I was always too white for the brown girls and I was too brown for the white girls. And so my whole life is this in-between space. And now that I'm an adult, as I step into this person that I'm becoming, I'm still operating in that in-between space. I don't 100% identify. I'm not from Mexico, so I don't identify truly with being Mexican. I have Mexican origin, but I don't travel back for family and things like that. And I'm never going to be 100% accepted in American culture. So I navigate this in-between space. And so for me to identify as a Chicana is a way to acknowledge those conflicting identities and to move past that and to create something new. So
Ooh,
that's
I
what it
love that.
means for me. Yeah.
And when you were describing it, Christy, I pictured it like, yes, that in between space. I love that you use that because we can identify, oh, yes, I feel that. And it's kind of like you created home in that. Like, I can make this
Hmm.
home, this in between, and it's my home. It's where I'm from. When I went
Yes.
back to Mexico this last trip, it wasn't, I mean, it was fun, but really it was a stressful time for my family. But I remember telling my cousins what I do, like what kind of topics I talk about. And I was like, well, because I'm not from Mexico and I'm also like born in America, but my parents are immigrants. So it's kind of weird. It's like not this and not that. And she was like, but how beautiful it must be to have your Mexican heritage and have both sides because we welcome you here. And I was like, it was so nice to have her feel like I look at you and I think you have it all. And I was like, wow, I guess that's what gratitude looks like. So when you said that, like creating a
Mm.
home in the in between as a Chicana, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
wearing it
Hmm.
with pride. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Your cousin, my husband, has Chicano written on his arm in Old English.
Oh,
And I
really?
remember my sister's then husband swore that it was a gang tattoo. And he's like, it says Chicano. But it's just so funny because when I met him, I was like, he has Chicano on his arm. He had his motorcycle that he made with the calavera, and here I was, fresh. I have my bachelor's in Chicano Studies, so I was like, it's a sign. So, and then just hearing his family, like when I heard about you going to school for it, I was like, I got to talk to Christy and Rochelle.
Yeah.
Rochelle and I went to school together for that. So I think your family has so many things bubbling up. And I want to ask
Hmm.
you, because maybe for you it's like the norm, but kind of could you explain what it's like to grow up in an evangelical church in your home, in your community? What does that mean day to day? What does that look like for your routine?
Well, so I wouldn't say like my family today, I would not say that. I would not identify as evangelical,
Okay.
and I don't think that I would even I don't think that I would even identify as Christian necessarily. I think there there's no word for what I am really, like, because there are tenets of the faith that I had growing up that I still keep and hold to. Um, but there's a lot of it that I let go of. So I don't know that I have like a word for it, but what it looks like on a day to day is just, honestly, it's just an awareness of the
Mm,
fact that I am a spiritual being having a human experience, and to constantly try to remind myself, try to remind my kids that this is what it is. This is what is happening. And to just make that connection of just, you know, connecting with land. And like, we have trails in at the top of the hill here. And, you know, for me, that's my spirit. How I connect with like spirit is walking and in the trails and connecting with land and being in the desert with the cactus and watching them grow and die and all that kind of stuff.
is this different than how would you connect with your spiritual self when you were a child, like in your parents' home? What would that look like then?
Yeah, I think even as a child, I was really bent toward spirituality. I took a curanderismo class last semester, and I
Oh,
was
very
like, I
cool.
feel like had I been brought up differently, I might have become a curandera. So,
You could tear some
um,
stuff up. Yeah.
yeah. So
I
I
love
think
it.
that like, um, I think as a kid, I always spent a lot of time in my room journaling and things like that. But a lot of it was fear based. A lot of it was like praying because I had to put in the time. I had to show God how serious I was, and so I was bent towards that. But a lot of it came from a place of fear and I would even say shame, because that's kind of what my family has passed down to each other, I think, through the generations. Like, I think if you talk to a lot of the cousins, there's a lot of that that has been passed down. So, um, so
I
yeah,
think that was
I don't
looked
know.
at as something helpful, something that you're giving to help somebody do better. Because, and that's also like all they knew, because I didn't grow up really religious, but my parents did. So that shame is something that is kind of hard to kick.
Hmm.
But really thinking
Yeah,
they're doing what the right thing is and really not
absolutely.
thinking about the consequences later, especially if the church is saying that that is what they need. And that
Yeah,
conflict as a parent. I was going to ask you, you know, do you find, because I find that being a parent daily, if I'm paying attention, because I should be, grounds me to awareness for myself and how I either can like do things on autopilot or choose my highest self to like parent in this moment. But I find myself coming back to moments that like rock my world. Do you find yourself in conflict with how something happened with you and how you want to do it differently now as an adult? Based on like shame or something that you had in your childhood, and
yeah.
like how do you navigate that with your kids? Like, do you tell them or do you just gather yourself and then move in that way?
I mean, honestly, I think it's hardwired in me. My mom and all the women on my mom's side of the family had very strong personalities, very strong characters. And I think that that was fostered in a way in like my mom's family. Like my grandfather never really like um, hold a tight rein on his daughters. He never discouraged them from working and things like that. And so I think that that really like speaks to like who my mother is. But on the flip side, they're strong in their punishments as well, and so that is sort of can be hardwired in me to just my natural response is to yell or is anger, and I think the way that I combat that is to create space. I truly believe that it's important to have some sort of practice, to whether that's like meditation or silence or walking, things like that, because that is the way that you clear space in your heart and your soul to be able to have that awareness, to be like, oh, I'm reverting back to these like old habits. And so that's how I try to combat that. And then honestly, like something that didn't happen at all when I was growing up that I try to do with my kids is just say sorry, is just to apologize.
Yeah.
Growing up, it was like everybody screamed, yelled, you know, got hit or whatever. And then everybody went to their corners, shut their doors. And then the next time everybody came out, we just all acted like nothing ever happened. um, and so that's definitely not what is happening in my house. And I have a partner, honestly, who's really great about like, when I don't recognize it, he's like, yo, you need to like take it down a notch. You need to go apologize, things like that. And so I don't like it in the moment, but at the same time, I'm really grateful that I have someone to also pull me out of that when I'm in this space where I just like I need someone to pull me out of it.
Yeah. And it sounds like he knows your commitment that you've said in, soft moments with him, like, this is the mom I want to be. So when you're
Yeah.
not in those moments, because you're human and you're operating from past fear, past experience, and it is like, I've been in the zone where I'm like, oh my gosh, I like realize that I'm in the like, when the house is really messy and you have like a
Yes.
rage clean. When I realized, oh my God, did I have to keep going? They said, okay, what is that?
Yeah.
So yes, it's like, it sounds like your partner is reminding you later, like, hey, this is the mom you said you wanted to be. So that's not what that is.
Yeah.
And then, but that you welcome it because you're on this journey to be better, a more refined version. And it's really hard when we didn't have that. You're really working from a place of creating it out of nothing,
Yeah.
creating a place of softness out of a bag of nails. And not to say
Yeah.
like that so disrespectfully to our parents, but if our parents thought that discipline was shame and obedience, then what are we doing? And how can we constantly know that we're doing the right thing? So have you
Yeah.
seen moments where you're like, this is so hard, and then later you're like, wow, it worked? Like, seeing this through, seeing this softness through has worked. Have you had a successful moment like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of little tiny moments like that. Yeah, I mean, I think, gosh, having teenagers, right? It's like, it's literally the best and the worst, like, so, I mean, I think a lot of it is just acknowledging that I don't know. And so when they say something to me that doesn't make sense, and I'm like, that, what? Like my daughter, she was having an issue, and I recognized that she needed to work on self-love. Like, we got to work on this. You need to love yourself, because that is not going to make you feel loved. And so I was like, we should read like the 5 love languages for like teenagers or whatever. And so I pulled the book out, and she was like, I already know my love language. And I said, oh, like, what is it? And she's like, physical touch. And I'm like, for me, I'm not a physical touch person. And I was like, physical touch? I was like, what does that even like
Who
look
does
like?
that? Yeah.
How do you even do that?
Yeah. Who would pick
And
that?
my husband was like, oh my God. He's like, sounds like you need to read the book. And so I just was like, that was a moment that I could have said, that's stupid. Or I could have said, no, that's not right. And I was like, you know what? Like, it's humility, right? Like saying like, I don't have all the answers. So I'm going to read the chapter for myself. And like the end of the chapter, it had like some things that you could do if your teenager's physical,
Oh.
love language is physical touch. And one of the things was come up with like a handshake that you do together. And every single time they come home or you drop them off at school, like do the handshake. And I just was like, a handshake. Like to me, it's like, how would that like make anybody feel loved? Like, I don't get that. But I said, do you want to do this? And she was like, yeah. And so we came up with this like little tiny handshake, and we were driving to school the next day, and she was about to get out of the car, and I was like, wait. And she was just really like in her teen mode, like not wanting to go to school, And I said, wait, we have to do our handshake. And she goes, oh, and her face just like transformed.
I
And
love
she,
that.
we do the handshake, and she got out of the car, and it was like it meant something to her. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it, yeah, just being
I love
humble and
that.
just saying.
And isn't it
So,
beautiful when you do something with your child and you can physically see their fear leave their body, or
yeah,
joy fill them up, or love? Like, I have goosebumps imagining her. That's beautiful. And I remember
yeah,
times where my kids have been scared, and I tell them something, and again, it's the power of our words. And I've seen them go, oh, okay, because they really are looking to us. And then I think, crap, what about when I say bad things? Same impact,
yeah.
right? Like, same impact.
Hmm.
And I wanted to just pin this. I wanted to ask you, as you're saying this story, it was such a good story, Christy. A little story, but like, wow, so beautiful. I wanted to ask, what about those moments, like how apologies were few and far between in your home? Me too. Something I totally normalize in my home now. Um, but how about even that you were a parent that was like, let me read this book that she's interested? What about if our parents didn't make time or didn't think it was important to get into what their kids are getting into? Like, for my parents, it was like, we're having Christmas, but the adults are having Christmas, and you guys need to go be quiet when Christmas is
Yeah.
for kids. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times parents wouldn't even get the interest. How about that is, I see something in you that you're taking the time to go, not only am I going to refrain from judgment, catch myself because what I can say can hurt her, but you're also taking the time to invest in what she's reading and then do the handshake. I know a friend that dated a guy that's like, I won't take my kid to Chuck E. Cheese or bounce houses ever. I don't do that. And I was like, but what if your kid likes it? I don't care. I don't care, never. And it's like, wow. So the fact that you're doing a handshake, many parents might be like, I'm not doing a stupid handshake, and let their own
Yeah.
shame cloud that. So I just wanted to hold what I see in
Yeah.
you. It's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope my children appreciate it. I know that they do sometimes, but especially as adults, I hope that that's the lasting thing, right? Is that you want them to remember these moments, you
Oh
know?
yeah. Or don't remember the other ones and replace them with
Yeah,
this lovely. I really
exactly.
I used to get so nervous that, like, I have a teenager. He is not my biological son, but he's my baby. He's my first. And so I met Mike with his, well, I didn't meet his son for a whole year because he was very firm on that. And I love that. I was like, that's great. But when I met his son, I fell in love with him. We've been like a trio for so many years. So I know him very well. And in the pandemic, he was starting freshman year, and that has to be hard. Like, your high school experience, right, is cut short. And I remember he had to be home every day. We were all home. I was stressed out, and so I noticed that he wasn't coming out of his room. And so at night I'd be like all mad, like, how come you never come out of your room? Like, you're never out here, right? Finding something, and I think it was a lot of my anxiety too. And he's like, every time I come out, I just want to like take a break. I'm going to the bathroom. I'm going to go get a snack. And you guys just ask me to do stuff. Take out the trash. Oh, I see you. Watch your brothers. Every time I came out, it was demanding something of me. And I was like, oh, he was right. He was totally right.
Yeah.
And then I put myself in his shoes like, yeah, that does suck. Like, high school's canceled. I'm stuck with my parents. And every time they see my face, they're asking me to do something. I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And so I
That's
really,
really that's really lucky that he verbalized that to you.
I
You
agree.
know what I mean?
Thank you for the feedback, is what I said. But honestly, in the beginning, I wanted to be like, and I could say nothing. Like, and I ended up, thank you for the feedback. I'm going to work on that. And so I really have been working on it. And he does come out of his room. And so what I do, his love language is food. I know that's not in the book, but I know how to get him.
I mean,
Offer him
that
food,
could be.
right?
I would argue with that. I think that's
With
the
a
love language,
teenager,
100%.
they know,
Yeah.
like, they won't be as mad if you have food. So I'll like make him
Yep.
food instead and then say, come out here and eat it. But it's like your favorite food. And so it's not asking of him, it's giving, and it's also
Yeah.
connection. And that is, I think he sees it. But again, a moment where I think 2 years ago, I would have been like, F what you think. Come out here. Because I realized I was basically forcing him to connect with us. You're
Right.
going to be out here and you're going to have a great time. And I feel like that's what a lot
Yep.
of us grew up with. You're going to go to church and you're going to have fun. I don't want to go to church. I don't care. You're going to have fun.
Yeah.
Everyone's there.
Yeah. 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 And then my dad, well, too, on top of that, for me, my dad was a pastor. So it was always like, well,
Oh.
you're the pastor's kid, so you better go be nice and make friends with that other kid. And I'd be like, dude, no, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to
How
be
mu-
friends with everybody.
How much of that do you feel shaped your identity as a kid, like who you are? Like, I am Christy, this role in this family.
I mean, I think it shaped my life in a great deal of ways. I think for good and for bad. I think I played it. It was easy for me to play into the submissive role that I was taught of what a woman was. And interestingly enough, that wasn't actually learned through my parents. All of that was learned. I had a Christian private school education, and all of the shame around being a woman and being a girl was learned there. But like being good and all those kinds of things, that really shaped who I was as far as like being a, part of that there were certain things, spiritual things that were expected of me, whether I was able to uphold them or not. There was there were expectations on who I was supposed to be, and I was always the good one, the good kid. Um, and so I think I appreciated that because I always felt unseen, and those were moments when I felt seen. And I think that definitely played into, as an adult trying to be a good wife and a good mother, and trying to find all of my joy in motherhood, which is like, what in the world? That I don't know any woman who's like, that's that fully fulfills her as a human being, is to like, there's other aspects that are just totally untouched. But that's like kind of the message that is conveyed. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, I love it. And wait, speaking to that, how you said it's untouched, I think it also opens up room for duality. Just
yeah,
because I do love being a mother, it has changed me
yes,
profoundly. And I wrestle
hmm
with this because it's really hard to be a mother in a pandemic, fearing for my children, fearing their school, fearing what they're going to learn about life by borrowing someone's phone, like how easily they have access to dangerous things, right? By the phone and stuff.
hmm
But the duality of like how much joy it brings me to find myself and to like rush back to quiet moments for myself. And I do think that that is something that has been something shameful to say in our mother's maybe epoca, in our mother's era, to say like, I don't just find joy in being a mother. I also want to do that. But I think it's really important, the
yes,
duality, that finding joy in my life also makes me a better mother. It helps me enjoy
yes,
motherhood, and it helps me see my child's
right,
joy as valuable. It is valuable that
yeah,
my kids splash in the puddles. It is valuable that they get to be outside 3 times a day instead of, cocooned with me. And when I can
hmm
be in joy, I am more compassionate about their joy. Would you say that
yeah.
finding your purpose has helped you as a mother as well?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm much happier that now that I have like additional things, not just this one thing. And I think it shows. I think it sets a good example for my kids, that they see that you can be multiple things, and you can do multiple things. That there's not one sole unique purpose for your life. That there's a variety of things that you can do, and if your trajectory is good, then whichever way you go, those outcomes will have good and bad, and they'll have lessons either way. You know what I mean? So I think it
Beautiful.
really shows kids that life is big. It can
I
be
love
a
that.
lot of things.
It's options. And I really think, yeah, options is such a big thing to give our children because they might think that that's like, oh, that's great. And it is normal. But I know that I didn't feel like I had a lot of options. My mom, one thing she wasn't was vulnerable. And I get that now that
Mm,
she didn't have the environment to be vulnerable. So she couldn't, and she
right.
didn't have the time to be vulnerable. And so being able for me, like to be vulnerable in front of my children, for them to see me make a mistake has been like,
hmm
they're like, wait, you don't know this, because they go to dual immersion, which is 90% Spanish, and they're having a hard time. One, because
Yeah.
one of them's learning to read in Spanish, yet also learning to read in English. So I tell them, like, this is hard. What you're doing is big. It's so
Yeah.
big, and that's why it's hard. But also, when they're like, you don't know this word, and I'm like, no. I had to lose my Spanish in elementary because it was teased, and so this is a gift. But
Yeah.
also, like, I don't know this. It's really giving them a gift that, like, oh, my mom's not perfect, she doesn't have to be perfect, and that therefore I don't have to be perfect. So really,
Yeah.
also my kids seeing me make mistakes, and then the next day they're like, you were upset about this, but also you're in love with your business. Yeah, yeah, the day comes and that thing is there, and I can still be. And so we've had conversations about
Yeah.
that, and nobody ever had those conversations. It was just like you said, an argument, everyone's in the room, and then the next day there's like breakfast. So I love this. I
Yeah.
live for these little pockets of success.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I think it's I think I read somewhere it's like live the life that you would want your children to choose for themselves. You know,
Ooh, that's
be
beautiful. And
be the person that you would make the choices that you would want them to make, you know.
because you would want so much for them. And then for us, we're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll take that moldy strawberry on the bottom. No one's going to eat this. Yes.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions for you, but I'm going to pick a
Let's get to
couple if
it.
that's okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
let's
I
get to
s-
it.
okay, I saw in your I loved your testimonio de conocimiento, finding belonging in
Mm-hmm.
the academy. So you talk about really just your story of how you were in the Pacific Northwest and now you have found yourself a student of Chicanx Studies. But I want to remind you, we had tickets to Seattle, March 2020. We were gonna go see you and
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Oh
my
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 gosh.
partner had tickets. He had a conference March of 2020 or April of 2020, and we were so excited to go see you in Seattle. And we told you, and then we're like, "Hey, this thing
Yes.
called COVID is happening, and your
Right.
partner is a doctor." And he's like, From one week to the next, it was like, it should be nothing. And we were texting. And then the next week, it was like,
Yeah.
Cynthia, he's in, like, this is really scary. And I think we
Yeah.
lost touch after like a couple months. I couldn't even
Yeah.
deal with my own panic. Everyone kind of just like shut their windows, remember?
For
And then I
sure.
see
Yeah.
you on
Yeah.
Instagram. You're like, we're going to New Mexico. And I'm like, what? And so reading your testimonial was so cool to like see how that happened. And I just think like,
Yeah.
what a badass you are, Christy, to like really just step out on it. But tell me, like, how did that conversation? Because it's, a lot of your paper was about growing up, you wanted to find belonging and in your community, which was your church community. But a lot of times you felt like you had to be somebody else to be that, to be accepted in that. So how did you take this step to go from living in the Pacific Northwest and like, I'm going to go to New Mexico? How did that, I mean, you're stepping into your authentic truth. You really don't know how that's going to go. You're taking a leap. And why
Right.
this program? Why Chicano Studies? How did this come together?
Yeah, I mean, oh gosh. So, I mean, I think Matt and I, my partner, we've always wanted to live without regret. We've never wanted to like look at something and say, gosh, I really wonder what that would be like. Um, and we've just always done that. Like, I have friends in the Pacific in the Pacific Northwest who are like, you guys just are like, you just pick up and leave, like, Um,
I love
and
it.
I think it's yeah, but I think it's just like we we've never wanted to be force ourselves to stay if it's not working, like there's this song by like Death Cab for Cutie, which every single time I hear it, I just cry. It's called You Are a Tourist. And it's
Oh, I
like
love that.
if the story you've written is not, working, then it's time to leave. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with that. And so I think once we moved, when Matt finished med school, we moved. That was our first big move. I never had lived away from my parents. We moved from Texas to North Carolina. And then after that, it was like we moved to Tennessee. And then after that, and it just was like, if it's not working, let's just find where it works. And, because, and we could do that. I recognize that not everybody can do that, but, um, you know, it, we moved for a year to North Carolina in the middle. We were living in Seattle. We moved to North Carolina for a year because Matt was really unhappy with his work. He was burning out as a physician, and he went and did this amazing project. We had a kid in that time,
I
and then a year
know.
later we moved. Yeah, and then a year later we moved back to Seattle. And so I think just those kinds of decisions were not scary for us because we've always like just followed where we felt like spirit, divine, universe, God was leading us, and we just leaned into that. And having been on the other side of all of those, like, it was good. I don't ever look at anything as like a failure. It's just like there were lessons we needed to learn in that space, and we learned them, and now it's time for this next new thing. And so when COVID hit, we had kind of already been feeling like our time in Seattle was coming to a close. We just
Yeah.
didn't know if it was going to be a few months or a few years. And then when COVID hit, it was like, I don't even know if you're going to survive. Like, I don't even know if you're going to live. And I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have no education. Like, I don't even, I couldn't, we'd get kicked out of our house. Like, there's no way I can afford our life in this
Yeah.
terribly expensive city. And he was hustling as a doctor to allow us to live in that city. And so I just was like, and then I just had the thought, like, well, why would I wait till you died to get kicked out of my home and change everything? And then it was like, okay, well, let's seriously start looking at Albuquerque. And it was like, okay, well, let's look into schools. Let's, and Matt was like, I was doing schooling with the kids. And I was like, we're not going to learn about U.S. history. We're going to learn about take this opportunity to learn about Mexican-American history. And that's when the really it started clicking for me, that I realized that I was super ignorant about my own history. And so we just started he was like, UNM has a Chicano Studies program. You should apply. And so I was like, I applied, and I had considered going to college in Seattle, and the University of Washington was like, yeah, it's been too long since you went to school, so you need to start at zero.
Ew.
And
Ew, yeah.
I was like, no way. There's no
Yeah.
way you're making me take those classes again. And UNM was like, yeah, you're accepted, and how about we give you a scholarship for all those good grades that you got 15 years prior?
The total
I know.
opposite.
And so, yes, exactly. And so it just was like we were talking prior to this conversation, everything just sort of started lining up, and it was just like, and not everything worked perfectly when we moved. Like, Matt was supposed to get a fellowship at the university, at the hospital, and that fell through. So he ended up working in Seattle for the first 18 months that we lived in Albuquerque. He would fly back every 3 weeks and work for 10 days. Yeah. But I think we just, I think that idea that there's no failure, there's only lessons to be learned. It just was like, we can do this. We can navigate this. It's, yeah. And so coming to Chicano Studies, it was really just like, I don't know who I am. I want to know. Like, I feel like there are things about my people, because I'd always looked at our history of brown people as like being absent from the narrative. And so you just assume that you don't have one. You know what I mean? And so,
and it's so rich.
Learning about, yes, it's there.
So beautiful.
It's like, it is. It's just a wonderful, like, rich history. And so, I mean, really in those, sorry, I'm getting a notification for your podcast. So
you made it.
Yeah, I think it just was like, I found a story that I just couldn't get enough of. I couldn't get enough of this. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do with Chicano Studies. And then I just was like, well, what's a way, like talking about like, well, what's a way that I could keep doing Chicano Studies? And he's like, I mean, you can go into academics. That's a way to stay a part of the conversation. And then I found out about the Mellon Undergraduate Fellowship, and I applied, and I got in, and I was shocked. And that has been like an absolute, like, amazing journey. I never thought that my lived experience as a Chicana, being in the white Evangelical Church, would ever be a research topic, but surprise, it is, which is,
I think maybe there wasn't,
yeah,
like, people wouldn't have cared because it's a historically white-centered spaces in academia, and here you are, the perfect person to do it, to write it, Christy, and there's a space needed for you and people that can read themselves of navigating that narrative. It's so beautiful. And yes, I love you wrote in your testimonio that like, what are you going to do with a degree in Chicano Studies? And it's like how you said, like, I couldn't get enough of the stories. I was going to be a teacher and I went to undergrad, getting my AA. And, just like you, I have to take history. I'm like, boring. I want to take history of Mexican American history. And I was like this, what? Wait,
Yeah.
Tenochtitlan, wait, what? Malinche? And I just could not stop. Like every class, I wanted to go to their class. I was just found myself at the edge of my seat. And when you can really center your histories and these narratives, even with, American history and say, oh, wait, what is it on this side? What's the truth on that? It was just like finding pieces of myself, finding empowering ways to understand my experience or my family. So I feel you. My dad would always say, like, I'm paying for you to go to college to learn how to be Mexican. And they would tease me, like, you're learning how to be a Mexican. And I'd be like, and I couldn't explain it. So whenever anybody's like, yeah, I got my bachelor's in that, I'm like, it's so much more, And so for me to have rooted in reflection and to be able to bring, like, yes, I'm a therapist, but I'm more than that. I always say, like, I'm a creative. But in the pandemic, I was like, I don't think that I want to do therapy full time because it really takes a lot out of me. I love it, but it is like, it's draining. So I was telling Mike, like, you know what I would love to do? I would love to go in, like, drive around LA, drive around California, and do like videos of what the indigenous lands, what they were called, who lived there, how it was taken, and like do a historical narrative. And he's like, that would be great. We would, and I was like, but who am I to do that? So I feel like I redid it in a different way. I'm still being able to use my Chicano studies with mental health, and I found a lane in that. And so I just say that to you, like, you are here for a purpose in this. Chicano studies found you to carry this for a group of other people who feel, like they don't have belonging in community. So thank you for doing this work. And I know you go and do your, you go and speak. Have you found people that are like relating to what you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because there are not a lot of people talking about the Evangelical Church specifically. A lot of it is to do with the Catholic Church. So a lot of people can relate in that way as far as like religion and the downsides of religion. But the Evangelical Church, I mean, really the only women that I have found are the women who have participated in my oral history project that I'm working on currently. So it's really interesting. There's just not a lot of us. We're usually the token brown girl in the group.
It's usually just your family talking at Christmas. I love it.
Seriously.
I love it though. I feel like when y'all get together, it's like, because Mike, my husband is your cousin, has told me stories, and I'd be like, man, that's shameful, or like that's kind of messed up. And so he's like, I didn't even think about it till later. But then when you guys get together, it's like the old school practice of like desahogarnos. Like you guys are just in there together and you laugh about it and you share good memories as well. And I know that it's like something only y'all can really talk about because y'all experienced it. So it's also this beautiful, like, commiserating. Would you say that that's true with your family?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that this morning. Like I did this oral history project for a class. And so I had a conversation with Naomi. And one of the questions I asked her was like, why did grandma and grandpa leave the Catholic Church? And she said, well, they just wanted something. They wanted to participate in their faith, but they felt like the Catholic Church was too restrictive. There were too many rules and things like that. And so they converted to the Apostolic Church, which has its own, as we both know, its own sets of issues. Yeah. But I think about what moved them to do that was that they wanted, like, good faith is expansive and inclusive. And they wanted something expansive. And so then when I think about us today and what we're doing, every single one of us is navigating spirituality in a very different way. none of us are navigating it the same.
That's very true.
There's, yeah. And so, and we still love and respect each other. Nobody's trying to convert anybody. Nobody's trying to save anybody. And so when I think of that, I think my grandparents did good, because what's more expansive than what we're trying to create and foster now in our family, which is this beautiful, expansive, inclusive thing, you know? And so, yeah, that's
And
kind
I
of what I
imagine
think
them
about it.
like, that's beautiful. I see it in my head and I think about how restrictive they had to be, their sacrifice mentality or whatever, to look 3 generations later,
Mm-hmm.
Christy and, all the cousins, and then your children, our children, are free to
Yes.
know some
Yeah.
grounding and also to explore and teach us. I think we're really the generation to say, I'm going to learn from you, child, and be open to that. I think it's beautiful. And
Yeah.
it kind of goes
I
into
think,
my last
oh,
question for you. Go ahead. No, what were you going to say?
oh, no, I was just going to say, I think that a part of the reason why it works for our family currently is that uh, none of us are like holding to the fact that religion is the only way, the only answer, that religion is messy, just like anything else is messy. Spirituality can be messy too. And I think that we all, in our joking around, recognize that. And then, you know what I mean? It's not religion is the only way and it's the answer and it's the best
Right.
way. It's like, I think we all collectively acknowledge that it's got its own issues, and that's okay, you know?
I really see a lot of your family, how they've turned their own shame into compassion for others. Like
Mm-hmm.
very accepting of others, very accepting of themselves, of other family if they're going through a transition or they're going through something, and it's like your family has so much compassion. And I think it's a beautiful job of like something that was once shamed in them, they offer for everybody else as well. Like, no, you can be
Mm-hmm.
this, you can do this. And I think it's so
Yeah.
beautiful. And
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
question for you is, what is your legacy as a living ancestor? How do you think you'll be remembered? How would you like to be remembered? So we're 7 generations later, and that's like, oh my gosh, we had abuelita or tatarabuela Christy. That's 3 generations. And we're going to light a candle for her. How do you want to
Mm.
be remembered in what you're doing now? Your living ancestor right now. What are you doing, and how do you want to be remembered?
I mean, I think I would just like to be remembered as somebody who cared and somebody who fostered familial relationships, and um, yeah, somebody who was just like a loving person and an accepting person, and somebody who really tried and fought to uphold the idea of family.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
And with that, I wanted to ask a little question. We have a little bit more time. I wanted to ask, I read a post, and it said, like, just because our parents didn't break all the generational curses doesn't mean they didn't break some. What would
Mm-hmm.
you say your parents did in their lineage, in their generation, to break something that you didn't have to go through? That maybe for us, it's like, why couldn't you do all these things? Something big for them between their parents. What would you say your parents did to break out of that generational pattern for the better?
I mean, I would say for my mom, I would say she was great at showing affection and great at listening. She was a great listener growing up. When I was crying about a boy or something like that, she always took the time to listen to me, which I don't know that she had growing up. She was just a very encouraging mother. And so I appreciate that about my mom, because I feel like that was different than what she was handed. She
Beautiful.
tried. Yeah. And then my dad is just like, he's a learner and a thinker. And I really learned that it would be okay to leave home from his life choices and like them moving to like Texas and then California and back to Texas. And I think I just learned to think bigger about the world from my dad.
Beautiful. Imagine what your kids get from see, I see it all as steps. Your dad gave you that alley-oop in his own life, right? By living, by being in his purpose. That was one alley-oop, your mom's alley-oop, and then imagine the big alley-oop that you give your kids just by being in your gathering all the nuggets. Like I tell my teenager, I'm his stepmom, but I feel like he gets the benefit of having like 6 families, 4 families on either side. But like he gets like 6 Christmases. But I always tell him like, honey, I know it might be difficult a lot of times, but you get the chance to observe different families and say, I love this about this family. That's going to be my new tradition. That's going to be what I keep in my family when I'm older. I'm not going to bring this into my family. And he gets so many families to choose from and pick the goodness, and we all have the goodness.
Yes.
And I just think of you, like all the steps that we're given, maybe our parents could give us this, but like listening is a big one. And especially if we don't have it. So that's so beautiful to share. And I see your kids getting a big alley-oop from your lifetime. So thank you, Christy, for sharing in vulnerability and just showing up authentically like you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.